Welcome to the Coffee Break Show. Today I have my good friend Andrew Kap on, and we're going to laugh and have a great time. And we're going to talk about how he sold 100,000 copies of his book. I'm so jealous. Okay, you guys, we'll be right back. You're on the Success Secrets for Business, Family, and Life channel. This is the Coffee Break Show. Today we have Andrew Kap on. Welcome, my friend. I'm so glad you're here.
Vickie, thank you so much for having me. It's always a pleasure speaking with you, and this is a wonderful excuse to do so. So thanks for
I
having me.
know. And I think it's been almost a year since you've been on the show. It's been quite a long time when you were releasing the one great book that was the last law of attraction book you will ever need to read, which is true. I really like that book. If you haven't gotten it, go out and get it because it is a game changer for everyone. But today we're going to talk about your new book, which I just finished. I actually read it twice. I'm not kidding. I have highlights in there and everything else. And your new book, you are talking about how you sold 100,000 copies using, it's like, what was it? 3 simple words to sell 100,000 copies.
Yeah, like the official name of the book is 3 words I use to sell 100,000 books. But
Yes.
yeah, they are simple words. In fact, so simple. And I usually don't spit them out. I tell people you'll remember this from the book. I warn people up front, like, listen, when you hear the words, they're going to be underwhelming. The magic, the power, the leverage, the momentum is in how the words are used. And that's, as you know, where I really spend the book. I spend the book saying, all right, here's these words where I filter every decision that I made to sell these 100,000 books. But let me show you how to actually use it. And
Yeah.
and by the way, please, I'm an open book. Feel free to ask me like any of the, I don't
Good.
mind like, giving out the tactics
I'm
that are
going
in the
to
book.
unpack this because I know that there are certain levels after 41 books, after all the things, all the books we've written, there's certain levels where your first book is your hardest book because you're learning the systems, you're not quite sure what to do. And writing the book is one piece of it. So then you go to you give it to the editor who's going to, take their weeks and everything else. And you start your pre-launch plan about how you're going to market the book. Most people never get to the how they're going to market the book or they don't even know that they can talk to their audience through that book and through everything else and what you unpack for them in this book. And I don't want to give a lot of it away because there's so much. And everybody, I know my internet's a little wonky right now. It'll be right back. I'm a little pixelated. Ooh, poof, I'm coming back. So there it is. But anyway, you give so much information. You make something that is obviously so hard for people with really palpable, doable things that don't cost people a fortune. Now, here's why I like this book so much. Every time that you read out there, everybody's trying to tell you how to write your book. They're like, write your book in 10 days, write your book in 3 days, write your book in 14 days, write your book in 30 days. And I think if you do that and you're not experienced, you might have, but if you write your book, that's all they sell. I'll show you how to write it. They don't sell how you're going to sell even 10,000 copies or 1,000 copies, let alone 100,000 copies. And this is the power of your book, Andrew. It's the walk path. It's like your book isn't out there for a month, 2 or 3. It's out there for an eternity. How do you sell it long term? And this is what we're going to unpack today because you sold 100,000 copies over what period of time?
About 2.5 years. 2.5 years plus 1 month is basically it. Because last Law of Attraction book you'll ever need to read launched November 24th, 2019, and I think it might have been June 17th of this year, 2022, where I officially saw the numbers come in. And
Yeah.
technically, the numbers are late, so it was probably 1 or 2 days before that everything passed over 100,000 copies of it.
Wow. Wow. See, and this to me is this is one of the things that I find that is so important because I want to talk about the industry and the changes in the industry, Andrew. One is He sold his book for and continues to sell his book continually. But when you look at publishing, if you don't sell a bulk of books up front within the first couple of weeks, you're out. Like the first month, they give you a 3-month period and you're just charging and they, etc. But the truth is, that's not how readers read. I mean, there are some people who are on the, who want to try this book, this book, this book. Your book is capable of selling the contrarian way, which is why I like Andrew's contrarian way. It's like my readers are not gone in 3 months. Your 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 system of publishers and the big six publishers, the big publishers, they want you to sell as many as you can right up front because they're got another author behind it. Well, you want to continue creating the relationship with your reader, and that's the difference between there. And I want to talk about how you even figured this out. How did you get to the point where you're like, okay, I'm not going to do what the big publishing companies do. This is what I want to do, and this is how I'm going to do it. And how did you figure out that that was going to work better than the industry standard?
Hmm. So it's a combination of factors, and thank you for all the compliments here. Part of it was like part of it's I'm a control freak. So
Me
I
too.
designed these covers myself. I copy, not that it's the wisest move in the world. I copy edited both these books myself. I recorded the audiobooks. I edited the audiobooks. The only thing I didn't do was master them because I don't know how yet. So part of this
Notice he said
was,
yet.
yeah, exactly. But and who knows where that'll go? But part of it's just like an inherent like I know what I want this to be, and for all I know, the publisher might be right or might know better than me, but I don't have this, me personally, the way I am. Before I ever published a book, I've been an entrepreneur and I've been a one-man show for so
Yeah.
long. I'm just used to figuring things out, failing and succeeding on my own, doing both and
Yeah.
nudging my way. So the book and the success of it and what I knew and the confidence that I had in it is more a byproduct of just what I know about sales and marketing in general, which if I didn't do a book, I would have applied to anything else I was offering,
Yes.
any product, any service, because
Yes.
what it all comes down to, and what I imagine and assume standard business practices of the big time publishers are based on, is human psychology. When you understand the way people think, when you understand their value systems, when you understand what moves them and drives them, and hopefully you have integrity and you want to serve them, you can create not only something that's going to solve a problem or challenge in their lives, but have the insight to communicate to them that you can do that. And quick sidebar here, just for clarity, because I never want to be dishonest. This book is not for novel, like if you're writing fiction or novels. This is
Yeah.
specifically geared toward nonfiction authors who have books that serve people in some way, whether it's helping them learn something, do something, achieve something, or solve a problem or challenge in their lives, which is why the psychology I just described and the approach is so effective in this way.
Yeah, and I want to go back here because there's as a lot of people ask me all the time, do you self-publish or are you with a publisher? And I have been with a top 10 New York publisher, publishing company, etc. Right now, I do self-publishing and I have a hybrid publisher that I absolutely love. She's fantastic. But there is some still misunderstanding in the industry where a lot of people think that they're not going to have to do the sales and marketing pieces if they get it to a big publisher. And I can tell you that that is a lie. The publisher won't even accept you unless your email list is already big enough to go ahead and have 100,000 people on the list that you can do an email blast. And they expect on launch, like I watched Joel Comm do a launch on his book, and I forget what publisher it was, but it was a big New York publisher. And he sold 8,000 books in a day just doing one email a blast.
Mm.
And I was like, wow, that's really cool to do. But you have to have your marketing systems in place, regardless if you use self-publishing, if you use a big house publishing, if you use a hybrid publisher, it doesn't matter. This part of what you're talking about, everybody has to master. So when you started and you thought, here's my book. Did you think, how am I going to sell a 100,000 copies? How did you think about the process of marketing your book?
Right. So I didn't have the number 100,000 in mind. In fact, technically right now, and I recognize that it's in and of itself, it's a false goal, because after that I'll want more. But the goal, as ambitious as it sounds, is 1 million. But
Yeah.
when I first put out the book, it wasn't about selling 1 million. It was just about reach and impact. Meaning, what can I
Reach and
do within
impact.
my own bandwidth, within my own skill set, within 24 hours a day, in a way that wouldn't compromise my mental or physical health, and incorporates what I know about salesmanship and marketing? What can I do to get the book in front of the actual people who would not only hopefully love the book, but actually be able to be served by it, who would be inspired to implement it and use it and get a result, which, by the way,
Beautiful.
isn't just about being a good person. Like, oh, I'm such a great person because I want these people to be helped. I do. But also, I realize that only if they're helped will they recommend it to others. Will they
That's
give
right.
a positive review? Will
That's
they
right.
have faith in me to tell their friends about it? Because when you recommend something to someone, you are vouching and you're putting your reputation on the line. I
Absolutely.
understand, as a creator of any product or service, that is part of my responsibility to do so well by my customer, by my client, by my reader, by my listener, by my subscriber, that they feel more than comfortable in recommending me because I served them so well.
And I got to say, that's really true. In fact, you said this in a past interview, and we've talked about this before. But when I outline my book, I don't outline a topic. The first thing I outline are my aha moments that I'm going to serve through the book. These are the ahas I want to share with the reader. So I know that the value proposition is, I'm going to trade some money for this book. And you really get one shot. If you do a really crappy book, like I remember the first time I gave a 1-star review. I've only given one, but I could see that this book was put together by a bunch of blog posts that he took off somebody else's sites, because I had read these blog posts and
Mm,
I knew they were plagiarized. And I put that in there, and they put that in the book and everything else. And I thought, I could have learned this for free. If you can learn this for free online, that serving your client is very different. What I do first is that I don't think I'm going to write about this topic and it's going to flow out. I want to know, what are my aha moments? What do I know that nobody else knows, that's by learning experience or by that it's forgotten or whatever it is. And then I ask the values. What's the values of the client reading this book? What do they think, look like, and act like? Where are they? What do they want to do? And I love that you said that, because oftentimes we're told to write our story. Oftentimes, and story's good, but story with value is what actually makes a book sell and gets that review.
mm,
Stories with value and aha moments and pieces that are so important to understand and unpack in the author's position. And I think the reason I'm re emphasizing what he said is because when he says it with such chill. He's like, well, I kind of did this. And he's so chill about it. I want you to take what he just said super serious, because that's the difference. If you're just like, oh my God, I'm trying to write my first book, great. Congratulations. Who are you writing to? What aha moments do you want to share? How is your person feeling right now? How do you address them? I loved what you said about sales copy and selling. And I want to go into that a little deeper. And I want to ask you, when you think about the delivery of the product, which in this case is an idea, a proven system, a method through words, and you're telling them what it is that you want them to get, how is it that you block it out in the sections that you do? What's your thought process
mhm.
behind how you do that? And I'm going to mute myself for a second because I'm going to cough.
No worries. And I'll answer while you're coughing. So it's interesting because before I wrote either of these books, I was, and bless you if that was a sneeze, I was a copywriter. So for me, the mindset and the perspective I have is from a copywriter's set of values and set of motivations. And what copywriters understand, whether it's a short ad or a long form sales page or anything like that, they understand that there has to be a sense of flow and ease in the delivery of the ideas. It isn't, if I just care about sounding smart, that's not going to serve me and it's not going to serve the reader. But if I actually care about their experience of taking in the information and I have a way of gliding their eye through the page, how, I look at, the book title as a headline. I look at chapter titles as headlines. These, blocks of ideas that are meant to get people interested and intrigued and reading forward, because I know the only way I'm going to serve them is if I get them through the entirety of my book. So the mindset I have, like basically the last law of attraction book you'll ever need to read. And when you hear me say this, I don't know if I've ever said this to you, Vickie, but when you hear me say it, like, oh my God, let me read the book again and it'll make perfect sense. It's a 208-page sales letter. Only rather
Yeah.
than selling somebody on like a product or a service, it's selling them on the value of the content that they already paid for and their ability to implement it, with the understanding that I know then they'll then have the confidence and enthusiasm to implement it. And I know when they implement it, they'll get the result. And when they get the result, they're happy because that's what they came for in the first place.
Yes, and I love that system so much because, you have hundreds of thousands of reviews on that book. And what I like about I've read them. And what I like about those reviews is that people are always telling you which tactic was their favorite one. And they're like, I didn't even use all of them. I used this one because it was my favorite one. And after 30 days, this whole thing happened and it changed my life and blah, blah, blah. And I think that is so cool because in this book that you just did, you have methodologies. And before we got on here, I already told you I implemented this one and I like this one and I saw this one. And I actually showed him a book cover design for a book that just came out because he was the one. And I asked him in a private session, and he was the one who said, this is why you want to do book covers this way. And I was like, oh, I get it. And if you look at all my past book covers, you'll notice a marked difference between cover number 40, whatever, 39, whatever that book was, and the covers I have out now based upon the stuff you discuss in this book and in everything that you do. It's like that methodology is as important as leading somebody through the book. And I love that you said this because you look at chapters as headlines. Those are the points where you get hook points through that book.
Mm-hmm.
And then you want to lead them through the system, through that book point, so that they have something to look forward, the reason why they want to see the chapters. You do that at the end of the chapters as well.
Yeah.
Every end of the chapter, you do this little hook. And I noticed this because I've read your books, and that takes them there. And if you start reading my books, I have added his method to my books in that little spot where it drags you down into the next chapter. And I love that you just said this. I love that these are key insights so that people have the ability to help themselves sell more books. So you're starting your first book.
Mm-hmm.
You've never written before. You don't know any copywriting. 3 tips for the newbie who's beginning, who would be beginning for them.
So copywriting is this big term, and it's a very deep craft, and it's something where you can go down like a really dark road. But 3 things, like copywriting doesn't have to be this complicated thing. So for example, one thing you can do in the spirit of copywriting is say you, or like use the word you a lot when assuming that the style of your book allows for it. But if you use the word you're doing copywriting because people are reading where it kind of connects with them. Along those same lines, another thing you can do is just speak as if you're speaking to one person versus speaking to an entire group. Because when you visualize one person versus a group of people, you are inherently and automatically going to be more personalized and more intimate in the way you word things out. And, everyone's got their own style. But another thing is, again, from a copywriting standpoint, you want people to have an ease of reading through things and they don't want it to feel cumbersome. So one thing to keep in mind is the spacing of it. So rather than having like huge blobs of text where you're going to be reading, it's going to be stressful for them, they're going to lose their place. By spacing it out into little blocks, they're going to be gliding through the book, idea to idea, sentence to sentence, paragraph to
Yeah.
paragraph. So all these things that I just described are really about making it a fun, more intimate, more engaging, more dynamic, more comfortable, more invigorating experience for the person reading it. That's what real copywriting has in
Beautiful.
terms of the value for this context.
God, I love that you just said this. I love how you think about this. I want to ask a question as just a friend,
Mm,
because I look at you and I think, how did you even get into book writing? What happened one day that you just said, I'm going to write the Law of Attraction book?
mm.
And I know you were an entrepreneur, but what made you decide to become an author?
So the interesting thing is, like, no one will ever notice because I wrote pseudonymously, but I've written other books in the past, and I failed. And one of my books, which, so quick little backstory, when I first tried Amazon, I tried Kindle publishing. As a fun little experiment, I challenged myself to write and publish a book in only 24 hours,
Oh my
which I
gosh.
did. It was only like 28 pages or something like
Yeah.
that. So it was a small thing.
Mhm.
And it was well reviewed, but it didn't sell that well because I didn't have things on point. I ended up repurposing that as an info product, a better version for people that read the Law of Attraction book. But that notwithstanding, the whole thing about it was I was always comfortable, right? Like, not that we want to place these limits, but a lot of people learn like I'm either a reading person or a math person in school.
Yeah, yeah,
I was
yeah.
definitely more of like the reading person. I was always interested in writing, and even just in my entrepreneurial journey, I got into copywriting, I got into sales, I got into psychology, and I was always like used to doing the work myself because for
Yeah.
some reason, whenever I try to hire someone else to do it, they, in my opinion, did a really bad job. So
Me
it's like,
too. I
you
hear
want something
you.
right, you got to do it yourself, blah, blah, blah.
That's right.
But the thing about the Law of Attraction book in particular, and I think I probably told like the whole thing on our last episode of, my journey Law of Attraction, where I finally discovered what I needed to do to make it finally work for myself. That was in 2008. I waited 11 years because in 2019, I was just at this point in my business where I said, listen, I want to do something new, but it's got to be something that is in my life that I'm actually excited about. Where, to be candid, if customers or readers or whoever like reach out to me, I'm going to be excited to engage with them. I won't be bored or frustrated or impatient. And when the Law of Attraction thing come up, I'm like, all right, well, what am I going to do? Am I going to do an info product? Like, no, let me write a book, and let me not only write a book, but let me challenge myself to add something new to the conversation or something
Yes.
different, because there's like 1,000 Law of Attraction books out there. Hence the
Tons.
very bold title that I make sure I have
I
to back up.
know.
Otherwise, I got to worry about reviews. The last Law of Attraction book you'll ever need to read. So it kind of unfolded in this way where I had these little occurrences where I was like nudging the direction. And before I knew it, I was writing the book and I was on my way with it.
Yes, it's so interesting, the crafting of that. It is a bold statement. I mean, if you take a look at what you did, you took a very, very heavily written industry. I mean, it is competitive, that Law of Attraction space. There are so many people in there with that book. And then to name your book, this is the last Law of Attraction book you'll ever need to read, is so bold and it's so out there. I mean, that's a big promise to live up to. So having that and knowing that, even if even if one of a new author is here, it's like the last plumbing book you'll ever need to read,
Mm,
the last, nursing book you'll ever need to read. I mean, those bold statements in there, or whatever, if you can back that bold statement up like you just did, you can take on a big into. Could you imagine the last entrepreneurship book you'll ever need to read?
mm.
It's huge. It's such a huge statement, but it's calling people out. I mean, you're calling the industry out. You're like, this is the last one you'll ever need to read. That means there's so much good stuff in here. It's better than the dummies version, or the insider version of that book. And I think that there is, what I want to say to people is, if you get to the point where You're being asked to write a book in 10 days, 14 days, and 30 days, and you've never written a book before, but you've thought, oh my God, I really want to write a book. I think what Andrew does is so important to understand, because it's not how fast you can write a book. It's the content and the value delivered inside the book. And everybody doesn't sell you that. They sell you on that. Well, you're going to have more credibility. You're going to be an influencer. You're going to be the authority now because you have a book out. Not if it dies. If your book goes out and it dies, then and it's not selling, then you need to spend more time. Just stop. It's like, okay, you can create in 10 days and 24 hours once you have a method of how to do it. Now, it's the follow-up method that I want to talk about, because one of the best really publishing follow-up authors I've ever met is Andrew. And I've learned a lot about how follow-up actually builds readership and sales. And I want to talk about how you designed your follow-up system and he shares the whole follow-up system with you in that book. The thing that got him $100,000 in sales. And I will tell you this, most of you won't do everything he did in order to get that 100,000 books. This is not going to be like Andrew's one little secret and poof, you can sell 100,000 books easily. So I want to go to some of the key things, like maybe 2 key things that you think are the most important to follow up and do after the book is released.
Yeah. So quick little note just to lead into this, because, the last entrepreneurship book you'll ever need to read, things like that. In 3 words, I used to sell 100,000 books. I recommend against doing saying the last, because it will often put an unnecessary false pressure. And you can make such a sticky title without. Notice how this one isn't the last selling book you'll ever need to read, because this time I knew I couldn't deliver on that. But with that in mind, whether it's the last X book you'll ever need to read or some other really sticky, ambitious title, the whole point of the sticky, ambitious title is you want people to really notice it and buy it, but you've got to back it up. And part of backing that up is kind of like saying, listen, my opinion, like last law of attraction book you'll need to read, that's not only the last book, but all you ever really need. But I recognize that human nature, people like variety, and people need to be reminded of things. People need follow-up in that way. So a great thing that you might want to do is have a system in place where you think of some really free bonuses that relate to your topic, and you offer them to people, your readers, as an incentive for them to opt in for it, because then you've got their email and then you can send them supplemental value. And
That's right.
The whole purpose of that is, again, it isn't that your book isn't enough. It's that, well, what can I do to add even more value than even fits in the confines of the book? And for me right now, if you sign up for my free book bonuses for the last law of attraction book you need to read, you get 2 months of daily emails. I didn't do that overnight. I built I wrote 4 or 5 emails when I started. And then every time I wrote a new email, I just packed that on and tacked it on to the end. So this is a game of steps. Don't feel like you have to do all 60. You build as you go. But that's a key thing that you can do for yourself, after that you've written it. Another piece is finding a way that fits in with your bandwidth. Because Vickie, like you just said, people aren't going to do everything for 2 reasons. One, they're not psychotic like I am. And 2, they haven't specifically intentionally built their day around this to do this. I built my day so that I could do all these things, even though you don't have to do them all. But with that in mind, you might want to find a way that fits in with you, whether it's Facebook, whether it's YouTube or something else, of putting out content, whether it's repurposed from the book or it's fresh or new, that gets people excited and that gets people recognizing that you're giving them value even more, because it just bolsters their enthusiasm for what you've already presented in your book. So those are the things that kind of pop in mind off the top of my head. But you can see there's a recurring theme in all this. It's looking out for the reader in some way, shape, or form, where, for me, and I say this in the new book, your work doesn't end when you publish the book, it begins. That's right. When the real work, listen, we're all authors, right? Me, it's a grueling process, but let's just say we like writing. That's what we do this. The fun is, for most people, isn't the marketing and getting the word out, but that's the job. That's the real purposeful, intentional work that you need to do to get your book in the hands of people so that they can enjoy that thing that you poured your heart and soul into writing in the first place.
Yeah. And you know what's interesting too, Andrew? It's like a lot of people don't understand how powerful the reader is. They're just hoping to sell, or they're so sold on making the book that they don't actually really piece together what actually are you making. And I love that you talked about the reader, the reader, the reader, the reader, the reader. It's like the end user is always the person that's going to determine how your product is, right? So
Yeah.
I love that you sit with it longer. And I do that too. That is my biggest secret. It's like when I'm by the time I start writing, I have thought for months about my reader. I thought about what their problem is, what their confusion is, what they think is funny, what they don't know, what's being withheld from them. And I'm just thinking about it in such a way that the receiver is always going to be the person I serve, your
Mm.
reader. And what I also liked about what you do, because I think this is so important, is that sometimes in a book that is written, I now don't write books over 120 pages. I've done the 200, 300-page books, but I realize some reader, you can overwhelm your reader. You really want to think about what it is that is in this book. And then if there's a next book, then a next book, because once you develop readership, that's when it becomes very powerful because if you wrote good here and you wrote good here, remember that first Harry Potter book was awesome. And everybody was like, Harry Potter, oh, that's a great book. If book 2 wasn't awesome, her readership would have dropped. But that second book is awesome. And we're like, oh my God, I'm hooked to it. By the time we get to that third book, all she has to do is go, the third book's out. And the value in this and the value in this and the value, suddenly your cost for advertising is going down because your readers are frothing at the mouth for that next book from you.
Yeah.
And if you use what you just did in that way that he just talked about it, in fact, I keep reiterating what you're saying. And I wish, if you're watching this, you better be taking notes. You better be taking notes. Andrew, I almost think you should do a writing class for beginners, like
Mm.
online. This is the thing you do, and set up here. Let's look at the marketing first and what you're going to say. Here's your aha points. I think,
I might, that's a good, I might do that. I might
I
do
mean,
that.
with this particular book, the 3 words, it's like, here's your method and your system. And you can have the whole method and system and set it up for yourself. This is step 1, 2, and 3.
Mm.
Because I think the longevity piece of it's how you market for longevity. You don't market for that big pow and then drop off. That big pow and drop off. You were on. In fact, the Last Law of Attraction book was #1 for, like, isn't it? It's often still #1.
Yeah. It's still a
Like,
number one bestseller in 1 or 2 categories on Amazon. Yeah.
I'm like, and that's after 2.5 years. We're headed on your third year of being #1. I
Yeah.
mean,
It's
think about
amazing.
that. That's
And
really what authors should really plan for.
yeah, and I'm about to give you something. This is exclusive to your show because I've never thought of it
Yay!
before, and it
Thank
was
you.
inspired by you just describing things. It suddenly dawned on me. So here's something for people writing their first book or their next book or whatever. I now realize what I've done in my books for my readers in a loving way, not in a judgmental way, but in a loving way,
Yeah.
is I intentionally view them as cynical. Because when I see them as
Mm,
cynical, they've seen all the law of attraction books before.
yeah.
They've seen all the Harry Potter books before. They've seen
Yeah.
all, like, what, when I understand that they're coming from that perspective, it challenges me to say, like, what
Yes.
can I either say something in a new, like something brand new, or at the very least, the same thing that I know works in a new way. I
Yes.
have to recognize that they are cynical. They've seen it all. They have a
Yep.
limited attention span. They've got a spouse screaming at them. They've got their boss on their back. They've got a million emails to answer. They're scrolling TikTok. They're on Pinterest.
Yep.
I've got to not only get their attention, but hold it. And I can only hold it not with, with the, the sizzle, but with steak, with substance.
Yes.
The sizzle is good to get, like, the sizzle is good, but eventually the sizzle isn't enough. You need to have the steak to go with the sizzle. So if you view your
Absolutely.
readers as cynical and you challenge yourself to meet that in a love, not a angry, like, I can't believe I got to explain to them, but more like, okay, I get it. I'm cynical about things also. Let me present it in the most comfortable, clear, smooth, enjoyable, consumable, easy to implement, user-friendly process possible.
Now, this piece of advice he just gave you to authors, I listen to this and this is sales full stop. This isn't just about writing books. This is about how you can approach anything that you're doing in order to serve your client better. And that's the thing. And I want to say this to every author out there right now. Your first book may have done really, really well. It may have done great. And people are going to be really excited for your sophomore piece of work. And you really want to deliver with that as well. But the bar in the industry of writers goes up every day. I want you to hear what his thought process is. So if you're going to write a book that is going to be a law of attraction book, what do you think your cynical reader is comparing it to? Well, I'll tell you, they're comparing it to his book. Is it as good as the last law of attraction book you'll ever need to read? Is it as good as that? That's what the reader is thinking in their head. And having that forethought that you just had, where you're looking at how can I say it differently? How can I? It's like, to me, piecing that book together in 14 days isn't the task. What we're talking about with Andrew, and the reason you want to go get this book that he's getting. Do you have a copy of your book so you can hold it up?
Yep, I
If
do.
if not, I'll just, there
Whoops.
it is right there. Get this book, because what you want to do is create a relationship with your reader in such a way that it's lasting, so that it's like the thing he's talking about is creating connection with the reader. Now I want to talk about that in the first part of the book, because that you make the biggest emphasis on that. And earlier you said you could listen to these three words and just take them for granted and let them out of your head. But if you do, you'll be quietly sabotaging your efforts.
Mm-hmm.
And this to me is the key. This is the reason you should read this book. This is why I told him earlier, I got the book when it first came out. I was really super excited. And then I just plowed through reading it because, he's my friend. And you're just like, hey, I want to know what he read. So I read it. And then when I was done, I thought, at the end of the Kindle, it'll say, do you want to leave a review? And I didn't leave a review. I went all the way back to the beginning and I read it again. And do you know why? I'll tell you why. Because and I'm talking to all you authors that think you've already wrote thousands of books and you're already great. The mindset I had when I first read it was, I know this, I know this, I know this. Oh, I saw this, I saw this, I saw this, I know this. And because we're friends, I mean, he wrote the foreword to The Secret Joy of You for me. That's how, industry close we are. And I remember thinking to myself, I need to go back and read this again, because when you tell yourself you know this, you miss some of the big parts of it. And there were some of it I was like, oh, I love this idea. And then some of it I kept reviewing my mind. Oh, I remember when he did this. Oh, I saw this. I saw that. And I was so busy remembering the book that I don't think I actually read the book. So when I went back, the fundamentals, the basics and traditions of why books sell never cease. And we get caught up in all these newfangled apps and this and that, and hurry up and sell. And if you don't sell all at once, it's a failure. Don't. You sell books long term. You need to be a contrarian bookseller and think about how you're going to serve your client long term, how you're going to sell those books long term, and exactly what value you're delivering over and over again. So let me ask you something. When you outlined this book right here, the 3 words I use to sell 100,000 books,
Mm-hmm.
when you outlined that, did you get to the point where you thought um, maybe there's a second book in this series, or a second step in this series, and here's part 1, and the
Right.
next book is part 2? Have you thought about that aspect? Because I got to tell you, I'd buy it just
Thank you.
like that.
So first of all, thank you for all these kind words. I take them not just as a friend, but I know that you know your stuff, so I really take this to heart. I really appreciate that. To answer your question, it's kind of funny. I know from a business standpoint, from an entrepreneurial standpoint, from the standpoint of being a long-term author, it would be it would be wiser and more intelligent to think that way. But the way my mind works is completely excluding the idea, making it that it's only one book, and then if something occurs to me later, then so be it. It's almost like a thing like the room that I did leave myself was for me if I ever modify strategies on the way to a million, and then that becomes like a new book. But yeah, for me, as I was mapping out the book, I was trying to be as thorough as possible so that if someone did read the book, they had my whole game plan. Because the thing that inspired this
Yeah.
book was because we were talking before we hit the record button. Part of my process and strategy was telling people when the Law of Attraction book sold 70,000 copies, 75, 80,
Yeah.
people were getting on calls and like, Andrew, how'd you do this? And
That's right, including me. We're
yeah,
like, "What are you doing?" That's right.
and like, by the way, for friends, I'm happy to do this, but like, no matter what, we don't have enough time today for 200 people. It
Yeah.
got to like, listen, why don't I write this book, which by the
Yeah.
way is completely different niche. I'm not even People know me for the Law of Attraction. Like this is completely,
Yes.
but my name's on this. Who cares? I'm contrarian. But I'm like, let
Okay.
me just write this book. Let me give my whole game plan, my whole roadmap, my whole blueprint for them to model. And then if someone says, hey, I want to get a call on a call with you, I'm like, okay, do me a favor, read the book first, because you probably will decide you don't need to call with me after that.
Yeah.
Or if you do want to call, it's because you want to work on something specific for you. Like this will show you how to title a book, but maybe you want to talk to me about brainstorming ideas just because that's the way my mind works. But yeah, Vickie, too long didn't read. I was very intentional about doing a thing that isn't good for business in the sense of
Yeah. Yeah.
longevity, and just try to stuff everything possible complete in this book, just the way I did. I figured the method worked for the
That
last
way
Law of Attraction
that
book.
way your phone had stopped ringing, and I gotta tell you, I remember during that time when that was happening, you were getting hammered by everybody, like, "How are you doing this? How are you doing this?" And I remember, getting on a call with you, and I remember you saying, "Well, I'm doing this, and I'm doing this, and I'm doing this," and I was like, "Clever." But I also remember thinking to myself, "This is what they tell you not to do
Hmm.
in the publishing things," and I was like, "Huh, you have discovered what they don't want authors to know, because if they did know, they would need publishers less. And once you get to the point where you need publishers less, they suddenly can't make their money because they're dependent on authors sharing royalties, right? So the business model gets a little crumbled. So when I say contrarian, this guy is a contrarian thinker. How many self-published authors have sold 100,000 books? Think about that. It's a very rare, small percentage. And I keep thinking to myself that this is, he's going to tell you what they don't want you to know. They're going to want you to sign the contract, agree to stuff that doesn't feel good to you, that doesn't empower you. And he's going to show you how to take your power back and do it. And in his thing, all by yourself. And I actually think that that is the future of publishing right there, that you've just created with this 3 words I used to sell 100,000 books. And I think that you spent a lot of time before you wrote the book thinking about the reader. And I think a lot of people think that if they have a lot of knowledge about a topic and they just write the book, that the reader goes and looks for them. And that's not true. The reader is a relationship. Now, I want to talk about how many bonuses you gave in your book, because it is a plethora. You've
Hmm.
given more bonuses than I ever give in my book. I was like, holy smoke, these are, there's so many here. It's just like a plethora of these bonuses. And I just thought, so perfect. How do you think about your bonuses? Now, I know we talked earlier, you were
Hmm.
like, how can I give more value? One of them is that you said, if you are with me and you get this book, you get an email every day. And it's true, you do, for this many days. So there's a plan where you've created the value and the bonuses afterwards to serve them even more and deeper in a quality way. Do you do that as you write the book, after you write the book, or before you write the book? And tell us your process of that.
Yeah, sure. So So just for clarity on this, and believe like one of the things I teach in 3 words I use to sell 100,000 books is the value of not just telling your reader like, hey, I've got a mailing list, maybe you want to get on it, but again, incentivize them because no one wants email,
Yeah.
incentivizing them with really juicy bonuses. So
Mhm.
the bonuses, they whenever they come to me, and often it's through the writing of the book because sometimes I'll do something, I'm like, hey, I can't fit this in the confines of text, but I can do a video on this, and it'll be a great supplement to what I'm doing. Like, for example, I have a chapter on creating a one like a cover that is impossible to ignore. I'm like, okay, cool. Let me give the whole game plan, but one of the bonuses is a 27-minute video where I actually break down all my drafts of the cover of my book, where I
Yep.
explain the human psychology of why I did this, why I didn't do
Yep.
that, and whether you love or hate it, why it's actually a good, even if you don't think so, why it's actually a really good cover, at least in my humble opinion.
And
Um,
it is good because I actually got that from you for free before you even did it. I was like, "Okay," and you're like, "Okay, your cover is the issue. Here's what we need to do." And I remember doing that. It is a great bonus. And I just showed him a couple of covers that of my new books that are coming out with his method that he taught me. And that's a great bonus, by the way. It is worth it. Worth
Thank you.
the whole book. Just that to learn to do that is
Yeah.
worth the entire book.
And by the way, quick sidebar, part of my intention with as many chapters as possible is to make each chapter on its own worth then more than the value of the book. Like that
Yeah,
alone is worth the price of admission. So
that's
with that
right.
in mind, with the bonuses, I actually say, like, what can I do where it's free, but if it wasn't free, people would pay a lot of money for it and
Yes,
still feel really good about that purchase. And
beautiful.
like the whole goal is me, and it's not about like I'm not competing with other people. I don't want to hurt other people's business or anything like that. Like let them compete with themselves and try to do better, and let me compete with myself and try to do better. But my goal is to say, let me make my free stuff more valuable to people than something that somebody else is charging for. So the reason I did 10 bonuses, but we'll call them 9 because one of them is just me saying, listen, you're going to be on my first dibs list where I'll alert you first. So it's technically not a bonus, but I worded it in a way just as a demonstration for people when they make their bonuses. But I made 9 different bonuses. I think all of them are videos that are all supplements to different parts of the book to reinforce and re-enhance what people are learning. So like for me, a bonus that I wouldn't do for 3 words to sell 100,000 books, I wouldn't do a law of attraction bonus because it's not about the law of attraction. But I'm going to do it about things in the book because the person that came to the book is looking to solve that specific problem. So why not give something perfectly relatable? And I think I say this in the book. Like if you have a book where you're showing people how to pitch a baseball better, you don't want your bonus to be on baseball cards because that has nothing to
Right.
do with it. You want your bonus to be on a diet to eat to help your body recover so that you can pitch better, or ways of holding the ball so that you have a better delivery or better technique. It's specific, not baseball, but to throwing a baseball because that's what your book is about.
God, I love this. I want to let you know I am doing a series, the Cash Flow Mojo series. And in book 2, because I had completed your book, and in book 2, I remember thinking to myself, well, I want to put the clickable bonus right where I think the message needs to go. And so I did. I put in, as you're reading the book, the example of what I'm talking about. The link to the example is right there. You can just click it and go right over the video starts, and it starts playing right there. And what I like about what you said is because you're using the things that we didn't have before to connect with your client. We didn't have certain technologies right now that make it easy for us to create these bonuses and put them inside our books and put them out to our audience in that way. But I wanted to, give credit where credit is due. I learned some of these new skills. I told you I read it once really fast all the way through and I liked it. Then I went back and I actually was like, implement this and implement this. And I put my ticks as to what I wanted to implement, how I wanted to implement. And I definitely have the systems. He's seen all the covers. He's looked at everything anyway, my point is there's so many things that if you're an experienced author, that's great. I'm an experienced author too. But times they are a changing. Technologies have changed. Readers have changed. The consciousness of readers have changed. They have expectations. They are cynical. They're tired of fluffery in books. They want implementable methodologies, proven systems, connections, aha moments, understandings. And if you are a nonfiction writer and you can deliver that, you have created a system by which you're building trust between your reader and you, and then they want to buy from you. It's very simple. If you rush through this process, like, okay, I'm in this, I got to write this book in 14 days thing, and I'm not going to think about it, I got to get it done. You might be putting a hole in your boat that you want to patch up. So I do have a couple more questions I want to ask him. I really want to, while I have him, I want to bleed everything I can from him so that you should be taking notes. If you're an experienced book writer, go get that book. If you have more than one book out and you're like, all three of my books haven't sold even 100,000 copies all put together, then you need his book. You need to go read that now and see what it is that you can do to create those sales. So I want to say that what I like about your style of marketing is that it's not like bro marketing where I'm trying to FOMO you into buying the book. And I like your enticements. Everything about your book builds on itself. The bonuses build on themselves. The stories build on themselves. The methodologies build on themselves. These are things that you're there, but I want to talk about being daring, and I thought you were very daring in your book.
Mm.
And what I mean by that is you've given some of the hard realities. You don't hold back on some of the, hey, if you just pass this word and you just blew this off, well, that's why you're not succeeding. You're able to call people out without having them be defensive when they're, learning the truth. This is the truth. This is how it really is. This is the truth. So what I want to ask you right now, and if you hear my dog barking, that's okay.
Mm.
But if you're actually to the point where you are looking at building your book, I think readers, or at least me, when somebody tells the truth like you have, the way you do, that's what I want to talk about, because I think that's a big trust builder. Like, you can trust this guy. He's been through it. He's speaking the truth. How do you get to the point where your writing is carefrontational
Mm-hmm.
and say, this is why you're losing, and or this is, if you blow by this, you're going to screw yourself over?
Yeah.
How did you get to the point where that's, how do you think about sculpting that?
So this is the second time in this interview where you're making me even reassess myself completely, because I'm hearing you say
Yay.
that, I'm like, oh, I did do that, but I didn't consciously do it. But I do know now, hearing you say this, I have a self-awareness. So
Hmm.
for me, it's very easy to deliver bad news when
Yes.
you've got good news right on the end of it that you're not charging them for. Like, in other words, like, bad news, you made this mistake. Good news is you can do this. And by the way, you don't have to pay me another dime. You already bought the book. And this isn't a horrible thing. Like, I
Yeah.
I coat the bad news or the hard truths with solutions. It does me no good, and it does the reader no good to just complain about something if there's nothing constructive to give them along with it. Hearing you say that and ask that question to me thinking about it and having self-awareness, I believe that's how I go about it. Um, Intuitively. I didn't realize I'm doing it. I think that's my personality, because I've been, before I was a full-time entrepreneur, or even when I was a part-time entrepreneur, I've been a middle manager, and I know what it's like to manage people and manage their expectations. I know about, like, the compliment sandwich, where,
Yeah.
you give them the bad feedback between two good feedback things. So I think it's part of my style to automatically communicate in that way, because I do recognize intuitively, based on my experience, that people do get defensive, and the last thing you want is people defensive when you're trying to help them, because then they won't care to help you. You're just upsetting them for no reason, because you're not, the help that you're providing isn't going to be received. So all you're doing is not helping them in any way, shape, or form. You want to make sure that your bad news is delivered in a way that can be received. Otherwise, what's the point?
Beautiful. This is, and it's important to say that because I know a lot of writers, they'll avoid it or they avoid the conversation.
Mm.
But that's actually why people pick up books to read it, because that's that's the point of being able to do that. And I love the system that you use. And I love that you're completely unaware of it until we had this conversation. And the reason why I am is because that makes you authentic and genuine. That's just you being you, doing you as you're writing. And that gave me an insight as to who you are as a person. And I really like that. And I think the system that he just said, and I liked how you use that middle management thing where, the bad news is between the good news. I like that system. There's nothing wrong with doing that. I always think, how can I say this? I spend a lot of time with my carefrontational things because with a lot of care, because I don't want the book to stop you. And I've read where I felt insulted by the book and I was like, that's it. And the reader is gone. How do you say it in such a way where you can turn that into, this is could be the mistake, but here's what you can do about it. You have to have that on the front and the back. And I love that that just went. And I gotta tell you, wherever you are, if you're thinking about a book, if you're thinking about writing better, if you want to sell more books, if you're already an experienced author and you're thinking, I would like to hit those milestones that Andrew's hit of selling 100,000 copies of your book, there's only one thing you can do. And that is go spend the money, get the 3 words I used to sell 100,000 books from Andrew Kap on Amazon, and actually read it more than once, digest what's there. Because with that, with his book, you're building a business. With other people who are trying to sell you how to write a book, you're just writing a book really fast. If you want to build a business, if you want to build a readership, if you want to build some credibility long term, you need to read that book. Don't actually stop yourself from getting this book. If you're even thinking about building a business and using ebooks or copywriting, you want to read this book. If you want to sell better, whether it's books or your products or services, you want to read that book. This is the point where you actually decide some of the cool things that you're going to do long term to build your book, your readership, your credibility, your influence and authority long term. And Andrew, I just want to say thank you for being on the Coffee Break Show, my friend. You are such value delivered with such a big heart. And
Thank
I
you.
love that. I love how you love people so much that you realized, oh my God, they're going to keep calling me every day. I better write the book about it. You
Th-
know,
yeah. First
love
of all,
that.
thank you just for your kind words. You're gracious. Like you're always so gracious and welcoming. And I think it's easy to take that for granted, that in and of itself. But it's, you're bringing my big heart out because you have such a big heart. And
Thank you.
yeah, like it's funny because like, yeah, this the last law of attraction book you'll ever need to read. It took me 11 years to decide to write it and 9.5 weeks to write.
Yeah.
This book was much faster to decide to write it because of request, but it took like 7 or 8 months to write or something like that. So it was more of a grueling process. So again, like these words of affirmation are not lost on me. I really appreciate knowing that the blood, sweat, and tears I poured into it was really well received by, again, someone that knows their stuff. So thank you for the best compliment I could receive is that someone legitimately found like, yeah, this is useful. I like this. So thank
It's
you for
really a good book. It is, my friend. All right. I tell you, we bring you experts, the best experts from around the world on the Coffee Break Show. Today we had Andrew Kaplan, and he dropped all kinds of good gems and bombs on you about how to become a best-selling author, 100,000 copy selling author. And I just want to thank you for being on the Coffee Break Show. Next week, we have a really great guest as well, and I'll see you then. All right, everybody. Bye-bye.